The Human Experience. Inside the Humanities at Stanford University. humanexperience.stanford.edu.
I say it's fairly easy for me to make this presentation because probably no one knows what I'm going to talk about. You know, when historians and other scholars get up, audiences usually know something about the topic, whether it's World War II or Abraham Lincoln or something like this. No one knows anything about Asian American art. Mike did a great job of presenting the names of a few artists. Good job, Mike. You pronounced that well. So the other names, you had some problem with, and that's because even though they're very famous artists, they're mostly unknown to most Americans. And that was the situation that faced us as we began this project some years ago. That is, there was zero understanding. There was no other previous study on Asian American art. And the assumption was, even including among people I would call Asian Americanists, that is, scholars who specialize on Asian American history and experience, that there was no Asian American art history. And I can tell you quite sincerely that when we began the project, the assumption was, well, maybe this will go on for a few months, and maybe we'll find 5 or 10 names to study. We now have identified over 1,000 professional artists of Asian ancestry who worked in California alone beginning in 1850. Not just a handful. And these artists, I'm not talking about Sunday afternoon artists, I'm talking about artists who were professional, who lived by their artwork, who presented in art galleries and museums, who were written up critically by newspapers and professional reviewers. These were serious artists who at the time, many of them, were celebrated as great additions to the American family of art. And yet, over the years, they disappeared from the critical view of historians, social historians, art historians. They disappeared. This image that's on the cover of the book, the flaming sky, it is an extraordinary painting. And it's been in the family basement for 40, 50 years. It first appeared, this is by the artist Chira Obata, one of the most famous and now recovered Asian American artist who lived in the East Bay for most of his life and was actually a professor at UC Berkeley, but whose career was basically destroyed by World War II and internment. But his painting, this magnificent painting, which measures about 4.5 by 7 feet and is on show at the Young as we speak, hung in the vestibule of the Palace of Legion of Honor when it opened in 1925 or 1926. It was the celebrated piece to welcome people into that hall, which is now one of the museums of San Francisco, and because it was so magnificent. And when you see it, it really is very stunning. And then it was, after the show was over and Obata kind of went into eclipse later on in the 4th, the painting was rolled up, put in the family vault or basement, and was forgotten. But when we began our project, this was our challenge, is to literally locate the families, locate the names, identify. It was just going at the very basic level of excavating knowledge, because the knowledge wasn't even there. We couldn't even begin to reference other works, other than a few other artists. So that's what's been so extraordinarily exciting about this project. And it has been a collaborative or a group effort, as Paul mentioned, and it had to be, because none of us could have done it alone. 1 or 2 of us couldn't have done it alone. I'm not an art historian. I'm an old-fashioned, historian in the history department. I'm not an art historian, a specialist in it. I have a personal connection to art. My father was an artist, one of the artists that we talk about. That's how I got kind of pulled into the project, because Mark Johnson showed up in my office one day and started asking me about my father, and Mark got infectious curiosity, and he kind of pulled me into the project, and eventually here I am as one of the researchers. But as Paul mentioned, I brought in a dimension of Asian American studies Paul, a long specialist, scholar in American art history. We had to bring in others who knew regional history, who knew international art history, Japanese art history, Chinese art history, and so forth. All of this expertise was necessary to pool so that we can make sense of the things that we saw and try to interpret artists' lives. So, there's so much we can talk about, and there are many different ways to interpret this art. This is just the beginning. We call this the first comprehensive study, and we really do mean it, that this is just the beginning. We don't see this as the end. And I think our feeling is that, and our hope is that this will generate many more studies and actually whole new fields of investigation in the coming years. And already we begin to see this. There are now graduate students who are interested in Asian American art history, and it's become almost a commonplace that there's so much to study here, and that universities are beginning to hire people who specialize in this art history. So a few years ago, a field didn't exist. A field of knowledge didn't exist. Asian American art history today is one of the most vibrant areas that we have.
The Human Experience. Inside the Humanities at Stanford University. humanexperience.stanford.edu